Hello, my name is Patrick McCarthy. I'm Head of Artistic Planning for the Ulster Orchestra, and welcome back to another one in our series of digital green room conversations with soloists, visiting artists, conductors and collaborators, where we take the time just to find out a little bit more about the musicians who are joining us. We're going to chat about creative processes and creative journeys through to our digital concert season. So joining us for this conversation is Northern Ireland Mezzo Soprano, Sarah Richmond. So Sarah, thanks very much for taking the time to chat with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Ahead of the performance that our audience are going to enjoy later on of Respighi's Il Tramonto. I'm really looking forward to that. We're recording this in March, but we're looking ahead to all of these exciting projects that we're going to do, and I'm sure you're going to have a great time with the orchestra. So for those of our audience who haven't come across you yet, tell us a little bit about your journey through to here. I know lots of our audience will have picked up on things that you've been doing with Northern Ireland Opera and with Belfast Ensemble, but just tell us a little bit about your route through, how you got into singing and things that have happened to you since your studies began.
Okay, I've been lucky to be supported by a great network of people. I think it started as a child, really, as it does for many musicians. Primary school, just wouldn't stop singing. You couldn't shut me up. And one of the teachers, said to my parents, she's actually quite good, would you consider lessons? And it went from there, really. So I decided to do an academic music degree. Hummed and had, how are you meant to know what you want to do with your life when you're 18, So, I was accepted into biochemistry, advertising, art, and thought, you know what, I'll have to do music. So it started off at Queen's in Belfast, and then went to a conservatoire, went to the Royal Northern, won a couple of scholarships to stay for 3 postgraduate years. So that's where it really got going for me. I performed for Vasily Petrenko and Paul Daniels and a few different conductors. After that, I joined English National Opera, their Opera Works programme. And that's really where my acting abilities were really nurtured. And then after that, I came back home to Northern Ireland to raise my son, who is now 8. So yeah, it's been about a decade that I've been freelancing here, there and anywhere.
Very good. And that progression that you described there is... It's something that seems really well set up for singers, that kind of not slow progression, but that sort of measured progression. And I know singers' voices develop at a different rate to, say, orchestral musicians' skills might develop. But that seems like a really sort of a typical and really useful and productive way that you've sort of escalated your skills. You talk about adding the acting skills maybe later on. And that's something that seems typical for singers, but not for musicians, maybe.
Yeah, like you say, when your body is the instrument, you're up against different things in terms of development. So I'm happy with how I chose to go down this path. I feel I'm really at my peak now, mid-30s, got all the training, and I'm kind of ready to go. Whereas, like you say, an instrumentalist doesn't necessarily have to do that because they're not waiting for their pharynx to grow, or they're not waiting for the biological sense to develop.
But I wonder if with that comes, by the time you talk about being ready to go at mid-30s, in a way that maybe for musicians they don't get that kind of that opportunity to reach a sort of a greater level of maturity during development. We kind of expect them bang out of music college at 21. When people, you talk about not knowing what you were doing at 18, when people come out of music college at 21, I don't think they really understand their connection to their instrument in a way that, of course, for you it has to be so much more kind of holistic.
One of the main things for me in this career, I don't want to watch a singer that can't tell me a story. If you don't have life experience, what can you really tap into? I want someone that has been through things, can tap in, have these visceral emotions. I want someone that has experience. I want someone that can reach my soul, and that is quite difficult to do whenever you're just out of music college and you're 21, for example. So I think that's one of the good things about singers taking that bit extra time. You know, it gives you more time for life experience.
Yeah. And I suppose if we're making a different comparison perhaps then between singers and actors, as a solo singer, you've got to find that storytelling resource within yourself rather than relying on a director to be able to do it for you.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It changes as you reach different levels in the industry. So often you'll be in a situation where you're told, okay, so now I need you to move from there to there. It's up to you to work out motivation. It's up to you to work out why, you know. But then you'll get people who will sit you down and say, okay, what's your character's backstory? Tell me, what did your character do before that scene? Why do you think and they really sit and pick with you. So you do get the different kinds depending on where you are. And I just love that so much. I always do it myself. I always do my own prep. And you start with your Stanislavski and you start with the libretto and you know where to get started yourself. And then when you meet a director that does have the time to sit and pick through that with you, I just love it so much. It's brilliant, yeah.
And how difficult is it to do that on a concert platform rather than an opera stage, where you're being asked to tell stories out of context, or just as we're going to hear in this concert, just a solo piece with no dramatic, nothing else to fall back on, no other resource other than yourself, the music and the words?
Concert work, personally, I find so much more demanding, because you're not one character going on a journey. You're going through all these different historical contexts. You've got so much more to try and travel through. And it's so much more complex, giving a recital, doing a concert platform. Just the other day there, I was performing some Mahler, Lieder eines fremden Gesellen, and there's so much drama in that. It's like an opera,
yeah,
you know?
Yeah.
So I was doing a set of Lieder, Mahler, Schumann, Strauss, different people, similar kind of styles in places. So I start with the text. You look at the text, what's this mean? You look at what kind of period were they writing in? What were they going through in their life when they were writing this? Is there anything else they could mean here? So I brought all this to the table and performed it. And I was working with the director on this actually, because it was being filmed. And she said to me, how about, instead of relating to your relationship, could it relate to your relationship with yourself? Is this maybe something else? And completely changed how I performed it. So with song, with concert repertoire, there's still so much you can do. There's so many different angles you can take. So yeah, it's great.
And how are you finding the transition from live performance to the way that we reach an audience now? Because of course, the distance if this is the story, you're telling a story within very different parameters and on a very different scale. So rather than reaching a concert hall full of audience members, now your audience is here. And how does that feel? What are the different sort of challenges in adjusting scale and scope?
Exactly. Yeah, it's a different kettle of fish. You know, there's a lot of similarities to performing with no audience and with an audience. But it's really difficult. Knowing that your audience is down the camera changes a few things for singers. And it depends what you're performing. So when I was doing Handel's Messiah, Irish Baroque Orchestra, it was very much the same as you would do it. You were imagining that the concert hall was filled with people and the cameras were just there. You weren't changing anything to suit the medium that we found ourselves in. But then you get things, you get things like projects where you can't act like you're on a stage because it would be too big on a camera. The camera can pick up the tiniest detail. So people would talk about are you acting for film or are you acting for stage? Because they're different techniques there. I found it a really exciting challenge, but definitely something that's required me to adapt in these situations where you're not just imagining the full hall and you're imagining that you're delivering to the audience down the camera. So yeah, it changes the scope and the scale, and internalized thoughts are much more able to be read by a camera than whenever you're standing on a stage and you're hoping that the person right at the very back up there, you know, they've still paid for their seats, they want to see what you're feeling right now. So it's different.
It's interesting because from an orchestral musician perspective, I think we don't think too much about the difference. We're just concerned about, you know, how does it sound close up, how does it sound in the ensemble, and how does it sound in the room. So I wonder if there's something there that orchestral musicians can be thinking about in terms of how we make the most of this medium. Because I know, for me, looking at the output of different orchestras across the world, for me the dullest thing is just to kind of pick up what we used to do in one format and put it down in another, and just assume that it works in the same way. I think unless we've got a slightly more intelligent sensibility about what happens in that transference, it's likely to just sort of fall a little bit dead. But
well, I mean, the Democracy Dances was a really good example of how we can take the situation that we're in and raise it and say, this is what we're going to do with the situation we're in, and we can now actually do this. It's not just taking what we've always done and let's just stick a camera in front of it and hope for the best. It's let's use this medium, let's work out what we can do. And I think that was a really good example of how it can work.
So that's Conor Mitchell's Democracy Dances, which the orchestra recorded in this venue last November, and a really medium-specific piece of work. I mean, it's an amazing orchestral piece, but then what Conor's added to it with the visuals is quite extraordinary. And you've been working with Conor on another broadcast project recently.
Yes, we've just finished The Musician. Had a fabulous time on that. I was playing the boy, and it tells the story of the Pied Piper. So what we did was we bubbled, we regularly tested. I've done so many tests. You know, we were doing all the social distancing, all these boxes that you've got to tick to keep everyone safe. And it was a really good exercise in showing that you can still work. You can still put on shows, even though there seems to be so many obstacles. You can still do it. And it was a brilliant show. I loved it so much. And my son, who is 8, I took him to his first opera and he got stepped on, right? They came into the audience and they stood in his hand. Never again would he watch opera. Nope, opera's not for me.
So a lifelong connection between opera and physical pain.
So I put The Musician on in the background. I was like, look, let's just watch this. No, I'm not looking at opera. And see, by the end of it, he was enthralled. So yeah, if my son likes it, then anyone would like it.
Yeah. It's a great piece of work. We all enjoyed it in my house the other night. And from where I was sitting, I didn't for a moment pick up any kind of mitigation because of COVID, and there must have been lots of things that you wanted to do that couldn't physically on the set, but it doesn't come across other than a really strong piece of work. So.
There was a lot of sanitising went on, let me tell you. You can't touch that till it's been sanitised.
Yeah, well,
but it was brilliant.
It's been the same in here, but I think, you know, the prize is so great of being back and making music and making art together that people are prepared to go to great lengths and put a lot of effort into keeping things safe. But hopefully we're out of this before too much longer and able to look ahead.
Crossed, yeah.
Tell me a little bit about what you've been doing with Northern Ireland Opera as one of their associate artists. That's a group that we've obviously had connection with over the lockdown period, and would intend to do so over the next coming months and years.
Yeah, I was singing with Wexford Festival Opera when I got the call about associate artist for NI Opera. And it was a wonderful scheme that they put on, just trying to create work for local singers. So I got to do quite a lot. I sang in shopping centres, you know, the kind of the humdrum stuff that you're still reaching people where you can, right up to workshopping a new opera by Tom Lane, Smithereens. So we got to do that. So Yeah, I think I had about 15 gigs from that associate artist program. And having done their young artist program, now the Opera Studio, many, many years ago, it was just nice to come back and say, I still exist, this is me, and get working again with them.
I mean, for me, in terms of what we're trying to do with the orchestra and connecting with people like you and the other associate artists and other emerging soloists from here, it's so fantastic to have a consistent body of singers here. I mean, obviously we have a long and very positive relationship with the Belfast Philharmonic, but to be able to sort of take things to a slightly different level with a small group of professional singers is just a fantastic resource which we haven't had here before. So looking forward to doing lots more with them over the coming months. So what does the next year look like? I mean, geez,
a lot of tip
right?
X, a lot of scoring out, a lot of tip X, a lot of putting labels over things.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very hard to know, isn't it? You just don't know.
I know. I was talking to my father the other night and he said, we don't write anything on the calendar anymore, we just have post-it notes. So that if it doesn't happen, you can just take it off and put it on somewhere else.
That's a brilliant idea, yeah. I mean, I was to go to Berlin. I was covering Hansel in Hansel and Gretel and performing Principessa in Sor Angelica. We kind of just have to wait and see. I can't really say what I'm doing. That was one possibility. A collaboration with Spark Opera in Wexford is something that is happening. That's the Leader project that's going on that we've just started there. The orchestra concert, obviously, Ulster Orchestra, and possibly something else with the Belfast Ensemble. I would really love to work with Conor Mitchell again, and hopefully that will be able to happen.
Yeah. I'm sure we'll be doing more with Conor. We've got plans, of course, for a mass with him later in the year as part of the Belfast Outburst Festival. So looking forward to lots more collaborations. And how do you keep things kind of level with all the sort of the half possibilities and things that kind of nearly happen and then sort of don't? I know a lot of artists have found it very difficult to maintain motivation and maintain the instrument as well when there's been so much sort of uncertainty and so much kind of disappointment over the last year.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head there. You know, you would go from practicing hours a day, knowing what you're focused on, knowing what you're working on, to then, is that happening? So I am quite fortunate. I know a lot of my colleagues haven't had the same experience I have of the past year, but I've always had something to work on. So whilst at the start, I'm only human, like I did kind of crash and I just found it very difficult. I was watching the effects on my family. My son lost my granddad to it. You know, there was a lot of stuff happened at the start, which does shake you. But then I kind of built myself up again, just trying to get routines, what routine you can find, you know, try and get going again. So yeah, I've always been able to have some sort of thing to focus on. You know, whilst I'm doing this Leader project, my next thing, I've got Mozart. I've got a concert to do for Canada because I won the Toronto Mozart singing competition, as you know. So I've got to do a little program for them. So there's always something for me to be working at. So I'm quite fortunate actually to keep going and to keep focusing and not letting it get you down, you know, because it's so easy to be told you're doing this role and I'm thinking Hansel, yes, can't wait to do Hansel, you know, that's so right for my body, and then you just don't know. So focus on what you know is going to happen and not let it get to you.
That's it, yeah. Just before we finish, tell us a little bit about the competition then. So it's the 2021 Toronto Music Vocal Prize.
Yes, yeah.
What was the experience of the competition? What hoops did you have to put yourself through? And then what does that give you going forward? What opportunities does that create for you?
Yeah, so competitions are not the most fun thing in the world, but they can be brilliant.
It's a real thing for singers, isn't it? Again.
Oh, it really is. You see, you know, I was chatting to Brenda Hurley on Zoom the other week, and she was saying for one job, she had 600 applicants. So imagine being one of 600 singers, knowing that, you know, your odds aren't great in this industry for singers sometimes. So things like competitions, the international ones, can just give you a bit of a platform, give you a bit of a boost and give you a bit of a wider audience to reach. So I decided to go for it, not very optimistic, thinking, oh, well, little old me, Northern Ireland, you know, I haven't got much of an international career yet, so why bother? But I did, you know, it started off, all you had to do was send in a few videos, and it was Mozart, it was all stuff I'd done before. And I couldn't believe I'd got through to the next round. I was like, really? So then I had to record some more Mozart, got through to the next round again. Just had a brilliant time, had an absolute brilliant time, because it was all done online, which makes it much harder for singers, but we were all in the same situation. What they said was, you know, they held it all around the world online. So we were all up against the same thing, you know. And then I got into the final, and there was this amazing German soprano. You reach a certain level where it's not just who's best, everyone's brilliant, you know, everyone, you'd pay money for all those performances, you know. Yeah. So it just came down to their favourite at the end of the day, you know, who had that little extra edge. And I ended up winning it. So brilliant, you know, it's been lovely, and it's got me a bit more recognition. And as I was saying there, you know, I've got to now film a winner's recital. Obviously I can't fly to Canada, unfortunately, but I can film something. So I'm going to film something for them to broadcast and be there virtually when you can't be there in real life at the minute.
Wonderful. Well, many congratulations for that.
Thank you.
Thanks ever so much for this chat today. Really looking forward to hearing the performance later on of the Respighi. Yeah. And I'm sure there's lots more wonderful things that we'll be doing together in forthcoming years. So
lovely.
Thanks ever so much indeed, Sarah.
Thank you very much for your time. It was lovely.
Thank you.